In the distant future, on a planet far from Earth, there existed a kingdom unlike any other. Zernova was a place of shimmering cities and powerful ancient warriors. Its people, the Zernovians, were known across the galaxy for their strength and intellect. The planet had been at peace for centuries, guided by their wise and revered queen, Lysandra. Queen Lysandra stood at the balcony of her grand palace, overlooking the capital city of Zernova. The towering spires of the palace gleamed in the setting sun, casting long shadows across the marble streets below. Lysandra was a woman of grace and power, with long, dark hair and piercing eyes that seemed to see beyond the physical world. Her beauty was legendary, but it was her mind and leadership that made her a beloved ruler. Yet, despite her many accomplishments, there was always something missing in her life, a feeling she could never quite name. For as long as she could remember, she had been told of a prophecy, one that had been passed down through generations of her people. It spoke of a time when Zernova would face its greatest trial, a time when only a human warrior could save the kingdom. This warrior, according to the prophecy, would be her true husband. But Lysandra had never truly believed it. Humans were an ancient myth, their existence only whispered about in stories. No one in her court had ever seen a human being, let alone a human warrior. Still, the prophecy was never far from her mind. She had heard it so many times over the years, told by the elders, written in the royal archives, that she couldn't ignore it entirely. And yet, Lysandra had never imagined she would be the one to face this strange destiny. She had always believed her future lay with Prince Varric, a noble and skilled warrior from her own people. He had been at her side since they were children, and she had grown fond of him, even if there was no spark of true love between them. Lysandra had always assumed that one day she would marry Varric, and together they would rule Zernova for many years to come. But in the back of her mind, the prophecy lingered, casting a shadow over her decisions. The Zernovian court was in an uproar. The kingdom was facing a growing threat. Rebel factions, discontented with the queen's leadership, had begun to rise up, seeking to overthrow the monarchy. They called themselves the Coalition of the Stars, and they had a single goal: to seize control of the throne and place one of their own in power. Lysandra's spies had reported that the coalition had secured powerful allies among other planets in the galaxy. They were well-funded and well-organized, and their armies were growing. It was only a matter of time before they would launch a full-scale attack on Zernova. Lysandra had no choice but to prepare her people for war. She called for a meeting of her closest advisors in the grand hall of the palace. As the advisors gathered around the large oval table, the tension in the room was palpable. No one spoke until Lysandra, with a heavy heart, finally broke the "Silence! We must prepare for the worst," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The coalition is getting stronger by the day. We cannot allow them to overthrow us." One of her most trusted generals, Commander Orcs, spoke up. "Your Majesty, we are already building up our forces. Our soldiers are loyal, but the coalition's numbers are growing. We need reinforcements." "Where will we find them?" Lysandra asked. "We've already requested aid from our allies, but they have turned us down. The galaxy is in turmoil, and our enemies are waiting for us to falter." A murmur of agreement passed through the room. The situation was dire, and there seemed to be no easy way out. Then an unexpected voice spoke. It was from the High Priestess, a woman known for her wisdom and her connection to the ancient ways of Zernova. "Your Majesty," she said, "there may be one way to turn the tide in your favor." Lysandra turned to the priestess. "What do you mean?" "The prophecy," the priestess whispered. "It is said that a human warrior will come to you, the one who is destined to be your true husband. He will lead your people to victory." The room fell silent. Lysandra stared at the priestess, her heart racing. She had heard the prophecy many times, but she had never expected anyone to take it seriously, especially now, in the middle of such a crisis. "I thought it was just a myth," Lysandra said softly. The priestess shook her head. "It is not a myth. The prophecy has always been true. It is said that the warrior will come from the stars, a human who is both fierce and noble. He will be the key to your kingdom's survival." Lysandra felt a strange sense of unease. Could it be true? Could a human really save her people? "You truly believe this?" she asked. "I do," the priestess replied, "and I believe he is already on his way." The queen's mind raced. If the prophecy was true, then the human warrior was out there, somewhere in the universe, waiting to fulfill his destiny. But how would she find him? And would he truly be the answer to Zernova's problems? The days following the priestess's revelation were filled with an unsettling uncertainty. Lysandra couldn't shake the idea that the prophecy was more than just a tale. There was a nagging feeling deep in her chest that this human warrior was real. Somewhere out there, in the vastness of the galaxy, he existed, and he was coming. But how would she find him? And what would she do when they met? She had never been one to rely on fate or prophecy. Everything in her life had been carefully planned, controlled, and expected. Now it seemed that everything was being thrown into chaos by a mere whisper of an ancient legend. Despite her confusion, Lysandra knew she had no choice but to act. The kingdom was on the brink of war, and every passing day brought the enemy closer to their doorstep. The coalition's forces were relentless, and the people of Zernova were losing hope. One evening, as the queen walked through the grand halls of the palace, deep in thought, a messenger approached her. His face was pale, his eyes wide with urgency. "Your Majesty, there's something you need to see," he said, his voice strained. Lysandra followed the messenger to the command center, where the palace's top advisors and military officers gathered. The room fell silent as she entered, and all eyes turned to the holographic display in the center of the room. "Report," she ordered, her voice steady despite the growing sense of dread in her stomach. The chief strategist, General Alaric, stood before the projection and pointed to a set of coordinates that blinked ominously on the map. "Your Majesty, we've detected a ship, an unknown vessel, crashing in the outer region of our atmosphere," he said. "It's human in origin." Lysandra's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the human warrior. "Prepare the landing party," Lysandra commanded, her mind already racing. "We leave immediately." The crash site was located in a dense, forested region on the outskirts of the capital. As the royal landing team touched down, the air was thick, with the scent of wet earth and burning metal. The shipwreck was partially obscured by trees, the wreckage smoldering in the aftermath of its violent descent. Lysandra and her team disembarked, their boots crunching over the forest floor. The scene before them was unlike any they had encountered before. The ship was unlike anything they had ever seen, its sleek, dark metal unlike any of the vessels Zernova had ever built. It looked almost alien in its design, an enigma that seemed to belong to another world entirely. The queen's heart beat faster as she approached the wreckage. There was no sign of movement, but her instincts told her that the human warrior, the one she had read about in the prophecy, was close. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the smoke and debris. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an air of quiet strength. His face was partially covered in soot, but his eyes, those eyes, were unmistakable. There was something fierce and determined about him, but there was also a sadness in his gaze, a depth that seemed to speak of loss and loneliness. He moved with purpose, his every step deliberate. Despite his rugged appearance, there was a calmness about him, as if he had seen countless battles and endured more than his fair share of hardship. Lysandra's breath caught in her throat as she gazed upon him. This was the warrior from the prophecy, the man who was destined to be her husband. The human was standing before her now, his posture straight and unyielding. He wasn't a slave to destiny. He wasn't the pawn of the prophecy. And yet, there was something in the way he held himself, the way he looked at her, that made her feel like this moment had been written in the stars. "Are you the one they sent?" Lysandra asked, her voice trembling ever so slightly, despite her efforts to remain composed. The warrior's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles, though his eyes remained serious. "I am," he said simply, his voice rough with exhaustion. Jax Carter. I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but I think I'm supposed to be." Lysandra took a step closer, her curiosity piqued. He was, without a doubt, the one from the prophecy. But his words held a deeper meaning. "You're a human," she said, more to herself than to him. "I never thought I would meet one of your kind. I never thought you were real." Jax's gaze softened as he looked at her. "I didn't think I'd ever meet anyone like you either." The group moved swiftly back to the palace, with Jax in tow. As they journeyed through the grand halls of the palace, Lysandra couldn't help but feel a strange sense of familiarity, as if she had known this warrior her whole life. The thought unsettled her. How could this stranger, a human no less, stir such emotions in her? At the palace, Jax was introduced to the royal council. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as the council members, noblemen and women of Zernova, watched Jax closely. The queen had kept the prophecy a secret from most of her people, and the sudden arrival of the human warrior was cause for both excitement and fear. "You're sure he's the one?" General Alaric asked, his voice skeptical. "I am," Lysandra replied, though she didn't fully understand why she felt so certain. "He is the one from the prophecy. He is the key to saving our people." Jax, though, still disoriented from his crash landing, stood tall. His presence was commanding, and there was no mistaking the fact that he was a warrior. But the mystery surrounding his arrival lingered. Was it truly fate that had brought him to Zernova, or was there something more at play? As Lysandra and Jax spoke in private later that evening, the queen began to realize that there was more to him than met the eye. There was something about his story that didn't add up. He claimed to have no memory of how he had ended up on Zernova, but there was a strange familiarity in his eyes when he looked at her. He seemed to know more than he let on. "Jax," Lysandra said, her voice softening as she looked at him. "What do you know about this prophecy? About me?" Jax hesitated for a moment before answering. "I don't know much, but I do know one thing. This feels right. Like I'm supposed to be here, with you. Maybe I'm not just here to fight. Maybe I'm here for something else." Lysandra's heart raced as she tried to make sense of his words. What was he trying to tell her? Was he the warrior she had been waiting for, or was there more to his arrival than fate alone? The days that followed Jax's arrival were filled with confusion and urgency. Queen Lysandra knew her people needed a leader, a symbol of hope, and perhaps Jax was that leader. But as much as the prophecy seemed to point to him, Lysandra still didn't fully understand what role he would play in the unfolding future of Zernova. She could not deny the bond that seemed to form between them, but doubts clouded her mind. What did he truly know about his destiny, and could he truly help save her kingdom? The war with the coalition of the stars was imminent. The rebellious factions were growing stronger, and they were already making moves to sabotage Zernova's key military structures. Lysandra had to act fast to unite her people, but in the back of her mind, she knew she couldn't do it alone. As much as she relied on her strategic mind and her loyal generals, it seemed the prophecy had other plans for her. One afternoon, as Lysandra sat in her chambers reviewing battle reports, she felt a presence in the doorway. She looked up to see Jax standing there, his expression determined, His rugged face bore the marks of battle, yet there was something almost calming about the way he stood in the doorway. He had the look of a man who had lived through trials that no one should have to face, and yet he stood before her, unbroken. "I need to speak with you," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight she could not ignore. Lysandra gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit. What is it?" Jax walked in, his boots making a quiet sound as he approached the chair. As he sat down, his eyes met hers. "I've been thinking a lot about the prophecy," he began. "And about you. About Zernova." Lysandra's brow furrowed. "You're not the only one." "I don't know what I'm supposed to do here," Jax continued. "I don't even remember how I got to Zernova. But I know I'm not here just because of some prophecy. Something brought me here, something bigger than all of us. I think I've been called to help, not just to fight, but to lead." The Queen studied him carefully. His words resonated with her, even if she didn't fully understand them. "What do you mean by lead?" "I think it's about more than just defeating the coalition," Jax said. "It's about something deeper. Your people need more than just a warrior. They need hope, and I think together we can give them that hope." Lysandra stared at him for a moment, her thoughts racing. Was this the truth? Was he really the one who could lead Zernova into a new era of peace, as the prophecy had promised? Or was this just a man, caught up in forces he didn't fully understand? Before she could respond, a loud, urgent knock interrupted the conversation. "Your Majesty!" General Alaric's voice echoed from the hallway. "We have a situation!" Lysandra stood up immediately, her royal composure taking over. "What is it?" "There's a massive attack. The coalition forces have moved up their assault. We've detected enemy ships entering the system. They're coming for us now," Alaric reported. Lysandra's heart sank. The time had come. The prophecy, the warrior, everything she had hoped for. It was all leading to this moment. "We have no choice," she said, turning to Jax. "You're going to need to fight. We need every warrior we can get." "I'm ready," Jax responded, rising from his chair. "Let's do this." The battle raged across Zernova's skies as the enemy ships closed in. The air was thick with tension, and the sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed through the capital. The forces of Zernova, led by Lysandra and her loyal generals, fought valiantly, but the odds were stacked against them. The coalition's numbers were overwhelming as Lysandra watched the battle unfold. From the Royal Command Center, she could feel the weight of her people's future pressing down on her shoulders. This was the moment she had feared, the moment that would determine if Zernova could survive. She had always known that leadership was a burden, but this was different. Now it felt as though the fate of the galaxy itself rested in her hands. And yet, as she looked at Jax, standing beside her, she felt a strange sense of calm. He wasn't just a warrior, he was her partner in every sense of the word. Together they could win this battle, not just with strength, but with the hope that their combined leadership could inspire others to fight for a better future. Jax, standing tall and unshaken, turned to Lysandra. "We'll get through this," he said confidently. "Together." Lysandra nodded, a fire igniting within her. "We have to. We're fighting not just for ourselves, but for everything we've ever built, for our future." With a final glance at each other, they turned to face the battle ahead. The battlefield was nothing like anything Jax had ever experienced. The air was filled with the sound of combat, both in space and on the ground. The coalition's forces were relentless, their ships tearing through Zernova's atmosphere with precision and speed. But the warriors of Zernova, under Lysandra's command, were fierce in their defense. Jax found himself fighting alongside the Zernovian soldiers, his combat skills tested like never before. His human strength and agility allowed him to match the alien soldiers in combat. But it was his strategic mind, sharpened by years of training, that proved invaluable. Under his guidance, the soldiers of Zernova began to turn the tide. The enemy forces, despite their overwhelming numbers, began to retreat. For the first time in hours, the Zernovian forces had the upper hand. But as the battle waged on, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As he engaged in another fierce fight with the coalition soldiers, a sudden sharp pain shot through his chest. He looked down to see a dark stain spreading across his armor. Lysandra watched from the A command center, her eyes scanning the battlefield. As the battle reached its peak, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Jax, the warrior she had come to rely on, had fallen. She could see him in the midst of the fray, surrounded by the enemy. Without hesitation, she called for reinforcements and ordered her ships to take position above the battlefield. She knew she had to act quickly, or they would lose everything. Lysandra didn't hesitate. She had never been one to shy away from danger. Without thinking, she boarded her ship and descended toward the battlefield. She had to reach Jax before. It was too late. The moment Lysandra landed near Jax, she rushed to his side, her heart pounding in her chest. His breathing was shallow, and his face was pale, but he was alive. "Jax!" she cried, kneeling beside him. "Stay with me. We can't lose you now." Jax looked up at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered hoarsely. "I told you. We'd do this together." As Lysandra knelt beside him, her heart filled with a sense of purpose. She had always known she couldn't do this alone, and now more than ever she realized how true that was. The prophecy was not just about the human warrior, it was about them, together. With Jax at her side, Lysandra's resolve strengthened. She knew that Zernova's future was uncertain, but with him, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would lead their people through this storm and into a brighter future.